think we can walk on this? Or?
Has to be rolled yet, I believe. Ask.
Is it okay to walk on it, or?
I think it's there inside.
Sure.
Okay, I'll see you on the other side.
Is this?
Oh, sure.
It's just all screwed out there.
Oh, yeah, so much stone in there that came down over.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was a mess.
Hey, Lance,
Yes, ma'am.
you want to tell us about the properties and who owned what and what was what?
Well, let's see. The little red house over here was the Lock House, and that was the... And the one down here at the mountainside, when the canal was in operation.
Were those 13 and 14, or was that 12 and 12? I think it's 13 and 14.
I think it's 13 and 14, yeah. Now, the man lived here, and when boats would come through, he would open the lock here to let them through this lock and then go down and let them through the following lock down there. There was also a little lock tender's house down there about the size of an outside privy.
Okay.
Which is where he would stay in it if there was going to be more than one boat come through in a short period of time to get him out of the weather and out of the cold and so forth. If it was in the wintertime hours and so forth, when it was wintertime season, I should say, that the canal wasn't full of ice or snow and so forth, that he could still operate the canal. And that's where he stayed to take care of heat. Invasion. Today it's a private home. People by the name of Gallus own it today and live in it. That's kind of their summer home. They also have a place.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll head down and we'll see your old homestead.
Can we talk a little bit about the big old house there? Wasn't that a mill, the mill owner?
That I can't say.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we got to...
Now, right across from the canal here, from the lock tender's house, was a mule barn, where the lock tender used to maintain and keep the mules.
Okay.
And they would swap these when they were tired and so forth. They would let them stay here.
Sure. Come on.
We better pause. So they're coming with the stone for the tow path resurfacing.
It in a barn in South Dakota. It's dry. It's a chicken bone. Feel comfortable? It feels good, man. I tell you what, it's unbelievable. A barn find, a survival.
Mule barn right opposite the house here, which we'll see the foundation of when we go down here. We'll stop and take a look at it. And I remember that as a boy when I played here as a kid, which was, in the neighborhood of maybe, I'm dating my age, maybe, let's say 40 years ago or so. And I can remember that the mule barn was there, and it had about 4 mule stalls in it and so forth, where they could keep these mules. This was kind of like an in-between spot for them between here and New Hope, where they could stop and leave the tired mules sit and rest. And they would stay overnight or whatever, or however long they needed to be, and pick up fresh mules and go on up the canal. Now, a canal boat loaded, going north, always had 3 mules on it because you were going against the current.
Oh.
And coming down a loaded barge would only have 2 on it because you'd be coming with the current.
Okay.
So you didn't need the mules to pull the heavy load south as you were going north because you were going against the current of the canal.
Huh. Okay.
So, and it was, the mule barge has since, the barn has since gone away. There's nothing left at foundation, and hopefully maybe we can see some of that when we get down to that area.
Okay. I'll press pause.
Okay. Yeah, it goes down and it was out through here. And what would you say it was? Maybe 20 feet by 40 feet maybe?
Yeah. Kind of hard to see with the construction.
As far as the size of it. Wood fast to the concrete.
That's the corner right there.
And
A
this is
pin?
Yep. Yeah, these are the pins. And
There's one end.
Yeah, and there's the other corner there.
And there's the other corner.
This is the other corner of the building where it would be right here.
Okay.
Close to where that bush is right there.
So 4 mules. 4 stalls.
Yeah, with a 1-story building.
Was it open or did it have doors that
No,
shut
it had doors. You could close it entirely.
Oh, really?
It was a one-story building with an A roof on it.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay, and was it painted? Was it plain?
It was pretty much just natural plank boards is all it was from what I remember. Of course, it was pretty much in disrepair when I remembered as a boy even.
Sure. Okay. Well, we're going to walk down to the next section.
Okay.
See Lance's homestead.
All right. I'll go to build that.
There's the old homestead. We'll go around the front later.
Very difficult to see, but across the canal, that was my homestead where I was raised as a boy. That home was built in 1927 through 29, if my memory serves me correct, by my dad. It's a Sears and Roebuck's home. My mom and my dad, before they were married, went down to Philadelphia to the Boulevard store to Sears and Roebuck's. And that's when you could pick homes out of the catalog at the store down there and mail order, and they would ship the material out to build a house. Now, it was not a prefab house, it was not a pre-cut, but it would be enough material to build that home, excluding foundation, electric, plumbing, and heating, and of course the property which it sits on. All that material came as one package, and it was shipped out.
You guys face me.
It was shipped out to Byram, which is a little town across the river here, which doesn't really hardly exist anymore. It was nothing more than really a whistle stop by a railroad car. And my dad, who lived at the Mountainside Hotel, which was his mother and father's place, which was also my grandparents', he hauled all the material home on a Model T Ford truck to this location here, and he built the home, along with some help with hired hands that lived at the Mountainside and worked there as hired people, you know, as handy people.
Right.
And they, of course, went across the old Point Pleasant Bridge, which was washed out during Hurricane Diane in, what was that, 1955,
That's
right?
correct, which is no longer there.
Right.
I lived there with my mother until 1973. My father passed away in 1962. And, you know, my mom and I lived there. I was her whole means of support. And I lived there until she sold the house in 73 at the same time I got married. And I still live in Point Pleasant today, another mile up over the hill here from the post office going back towards Gardville. So I'm still a native of Point Pleasant. I still consider it my home.
But you're away from the floodwaters.
Well, I'm away from the floodwater. That's correct. Now, when my grandparents came to Point Pleasant, which was in 1912 from Newark, New Jersey, they purchased the Mountainside Hotel down here. Along with the Mountainside Hotel, it was all the property that goes from the creek that comes down over the hill, which we call Sloppery Run or Slobbery Gulch or whatever, all the way to the mountainside, all the way up to the Hickory Run up here, which is the next creek.
I'll do a panoramic view. You can keep talking.
Okay.
They'll hear you.
Along with all the property between the canal and the road, from Hickory Run all the way down to where the canal and the road meet on the south side.
Unbelievable.
And along with all the river shore from Hickory Run all the way down to where the canal and the river meets.
The riverfront to the mountain, basically, and everything in between.
That is correct.
Unbelievable.
I don't know exactly what the acreage was anymore, but my grandmother owned all that property, ran the hotel, had boarders come in from Philadelphia, Newark, New York, as kind of a summer vacation place. I mean, it was quite a place years ago. We'll get into that a little bit further on when we get down here, where we can get it on camera and so forth. And it was a nice place to be. I mean, I never knew my grandfather Schneider. He passed away when I was only 6 months old. My grandmother ran the hotel after that until she finally sold it in approximately 1948 through maybe 1950. I don't know the exact year anymore.
Wow.
Which is where my dad built her a home, which is across here from the pump, which is where today Jay Lieb lives.
And you can see the little bit of white there.
A local veterinarian.
Yes,
We'll look at that later also.
And that's because my dad was a builder contractor, kind of like a one-man band along with maybe one other employee. And he did a lot of restoration and building of houses and so forth around the area, so forth. So he had experience in building. That's the reason he built his own home.
I noticed the canal's pretty wide here. And I know I had a theory about it, but I was wrong. You want to tell us why?
Okay. When my dad built the home over here, this used to be part of an orchard. and it was pretty low property in here. It was pretty swampy. And when they re-dredged the canal, the people that worked on the canal stayed at the Mountainside Hotel. They knew the fellow real well that ran the dredge machine. So he said, when you dredge that part of the canal, can you make it a little wider and a little deeper and put all the dirt up on that side so I can use it to fill in my backyard to make something of a backyard? So of course, that's why the canal here is the widest one all the way from Easton to Bristol, and also the deepest one on the whole canal. And it has since filled in. It used to be at least 8 feet of water because we have a swimming pier here, and you could not touch bottom when you dove in.
Wow. Wow.
So the place has now been let go. There's been no one living in it for probably the last 10 years. It's just standing there.
Owned by North Penn, North Wales Water Authority.
Owns it, yes, and they won't rent it. They won't sell it. There is talk about moving it, talking about tearing it down, setting it on fire, burning it, who knows what. And it's quite a shame to let it all go to pieces.
Yeah.
That's what's left of the old pier?
No, the old pier was right there on the end of where Allen's property is.
Oh.
Well, I'll sign us over and out here and we'll keep walking.
Okay.
Tell us about this property.
All right, this property that I'm standing on here was owned by myself until this past late summer, early fall. It was purchased with the original property in 1912. Everything else has been sold off through different subdivisions and so forth, and I still retain this piece of property, which happens to be 100 feet wide by about 200 feet or 300 feet deep from the canal to the river. I had it basically for recreation, for using boat and water skiing out here on the river and so forth, and picnics, and everybody that I used to have fun with has either moved away or died or whatever, so it was just getting a burden for me, so I sold it to the gentleman who owns the property directly across the canal here from us, which is back to the original portion of the Schneider property from years ago, so this belongs now to him, who he has purchased that, and now he's purchased this.
Sounds good.
So it's still same property as it was, but it's just owned by different ownership now, that's all.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay, now we're down at the river edge of the Delaware River, which is still standing on my ex piece of property. Right alongside of it here is what we used to call the lime kiln. It's right here behind Sherry in the bushes. There's not an awful lot left of it anymore now because the people who purchased the property alongside of me when they came through and built their roadway to the river and so forth, they went through their bulldozer and pretty much destroyed most of it. But it was a mound of dirt, and it also had, which maybe we can see later on film, it was a stone archway of places where it was open in the top. Well, they actually put limestone in and then set fire to it, and it burned and burnt and burnt and burnt, and that's how you actually made lime to be put on the fields. You would regrind it and make it into a powder, and that's where they just established this here as a lime kiln. Now, why it was always alongside the water, I don't know. Whether they used boats to bring the limestone here to do this procedure or what, I don't know.
Do we think the lime kiln was before or after the canal was put in?
That was before? Okay, that I wasn't sure of.
Before.
That I wasn't sure of.
Well, originally they would have come down with boats, but after that I guess they would have come by canal.
Yeah, okay, and probably horse and wagon, and maybe come down the river here.
Could very well have.
Yeah. We're going to get into a conversation a little bit later about the rafts coming down the river, and this was an eddy in here where the raftsmen could tie up with the rafts and so forth, and we'll get a little bit of discussion on that later when we get further down here to actually talk about where the rings are in the wall and so forth, where they tied up.
Yeah.
And so forth. So
It is quite the hill when you think of how flat everything else is down here.
yes it is. Yes, it is.
That's why I was wondering if it happened, if they built it with the dredgings from when they dug out the canal.
No. I doubt it. I doubt it. No. I doubt it.
Did somebody plow through here recently?
That's the Applejack from Well, these stones laying here on the ground, these were part of the archway of the lime kiln, and you can use your imagination pretty heavily. You can almost see where the archway was, just right to the edge, to the far left-hand side, probably the viewing of the screen there.
Now it arched this way?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
So they
Arched to the left. So when they came through with the bulldozer, basically they tore it all apart, which was quite a shame. But I think if we go over here a little bit further, maybe we can see some of the remaining part of the wall. In front of us, what we're looking at is some of the remains of the lime kiln. It's very difficult to, to figure out what we're really looking at, but that's what it was. It was an archway in there, and it was two of them here alongside of each other.
Two?
Yeah, one there and one right in front of where Sherry's standing on this concrete driveway. And they were all just all torn apart, and they came through and built this ramp to the river.
So there was a double arch.
It was a double, from what I recall. Yes,
Right.
Yep, it was a double, yes.
that looks like probably some more of the stone.
Oh yeah, the blue stone came from the archway, yes, yep.
And that blue stone, by the way, is Lackaton argillite.
All right, well, so you know more about that. To me, it's blue stone, and that's the only thing I
Blue
know.
jingle.
Yeah, there's blue stone, red stone, and gray stone.
Right.
That's it. That's my expertise on that.
Oh yes, well, so be it. Man. Continues. And the guys are out there shad fishing, by the way. Don't know if anybody's catching anything. Okay, I'll go. We'll continue. Okay, next.
Okay, well,
Now Tom just asked how, I guess right now Dale Stauffer, owner of Applejacks, owns this whole river access. And Tom asked how he acquired it. And Lance said, bad debt bar bill.
to the best of my knowledge, all right? I don't really want that cast in stone, but
Okay.
that's what I understand.
Makes sense.
The people, after my grandmom Schneider passed away in 1963 or 64.
Now, how
There
old was
some-
she?
There was still some property around that she owned of the original purchase of 1912. One was where the pump is located today,
Uh-huh.
the river shore directly across from the pump. This lot right across the canal, which is over Sherry's right shoulder, and the property directly behind me.
Mm-hmm.
The individual purchased the property, which was that lot there, and this at the same time. And
Now owned by Alan Fetterman,
Alan Fetterman, that is correct.
artist, at large.
And then the people who purchased that property passed away, and their daughter inherited, and son-in-law, and they lived there. And they acquired this property. Well, the son-in-law is the one, I understand, it created the bad bar bill at the Applejack. So to make some sort of a settlement, he said, you want the River Shore property? He says it's yours for $1. That's the rumor that goes around, but I don't know whether that's really true or not.
It's a good story. It makes
good
for
story.
excellent story.
Yep.
Because he was quite a boozer. He went through so many automobiles by putting them into trees, telephone poles, and ditches, and just tearing them up because he just drove like a maniac.
Whatever happened to him?
He has moved up to Potter County or someplace, I believe. In fact, when I was down here cleaning up the river shore just 2 or 3 weekends ago, prior to Easter,
That's the Mountainside original.
why he came down with his boat and stopped and so forth. And
The owners of the Mountainside have done a phenomenal job.
Well, there's the Mountainside.
When you say that has been resurrected, really fabulous.
That's what Lance's grandparents bought in 1912.
All those additions and all that are on it now, were those there when your grandmom owned?
no. We can talk about that when we get down here further, and we can full face it. I'm sure he has the camera running. We can. The Mountainside building was built in 2 sections. If the part that I remember as a boy, if you're looking at the very center of it, the raised section with 2 stories, that was built in 2 sections. If you look to the left, over top of the, looks like possibly the main front door, where you see only 2 windows either side of the door. Now, if you go to the right of that, you can see a seam in the concrete and in the stone where it looks like it was an add-on where you have the 4 additional windows.
Yeah, it changes.
That was the original portion of the Mountainside that I recall. All the way across the front of that, at road level, was a porch, bi-level porch. The right-hand side being lower than the left.
Uh-huh.
big white columns went from there all the way up to the roof that had a flat roof that extended from the A roof out, which was a second floor porch bi-level.
Uh-huh.
If you come across to the right-hand side where the roof drops down, that was a vegetable garden back in there that Grandmom Schneider used to get some vegetables out of and so forth that she raised for the table for the boarders and the people that would stay. In front, right alongside the road, were what we called live tanks. And live tanks were two concrete boxes that was fed by a mountain stream that came down over the hill and kept these two concrete boxes filled with fresh spring water that they used to keep fish in, that my dad used to catch with a net like Lewis's does down here in Lambertville, in the fishery out here in the river, of carp, suckers, and shad. Put them in there, and they would let them purge themselves as far as getting the mud out of their system.
Sure.
And then they would be sold for table use. He was in touch with a rabbi from Philadelphia that would come up, and he would bless the fish for the Jewish people to make gefilte fish.
Unbelievable. Well,
And
see, I never knew how they did it.
And they would have to be blessed, and then they would have to be live, transported back down to Philadelphia by another individual who had a truck with a tank on it, that he would be able to transport these fish live down to Philadelphia, and that's where they would be sold down there for gefilte fish. Now, on the very, very end of that same section on the right-hand side was what we called the ice house, which is now incorporated all on that same roof. It's the very far right-hand side of that building.
Okay.
Now, that was a building that was partway below ground and partway above ground. It had a hip roof on it, as we call it. And what that was for is they used to cut ice here in the eddy, in the river, haul it up here by horse and wagon, put it in there and pack it in sawdust. And they could keep ice in that stone building until 4th of July.
Unbelievable.
Now, if you go to the left side of where the section of the two-story building is, that is a new section that's been added on. And then you keep on going to the left, and there's a section of it that looks more square, and there's stone on the bottom and frame on the top.
Yeah.
That used to be the 6-car garage. That was detached from the mountainside where they kept their automobiles and farm equipment and so forth. To the left of that was a corn crib, which is no longer there, and a barn where they kept the horses and the cows and the livestock.
So there was a barn back there.
Right. That's correct.
Okay.
Now, all this parking lot that we see between the road and the canal was not there. That was all lawn and vegetable garden.
Ooh.
Directly behind us here, the river shore used to be the pasture for the livestock as far as the horses and the cows.
So none of the trees were here, they grazed?
That's correct. That was all grazing ground.
Wow.
Did you talk about the other hotel?
The annex.
Annex?
Not yet. Now, the other white building on the same side of the street,
There you go back over.
I'm going.
that it looks like it's adjoining the mountainside. It is not. That's a little separate property in there, and it was what we used to call the Oddfellows Hall, and it was a men's organization, and we used to have like general mechanics people, and so this was called the Oddfellows, and what their purpose in life was, I really don't know, but that was their meeting hall that they met in. Had no electricity in it, had no water, had no sewage. It was just a building for meetings, and that was all. It is today, from what I understand, part of the Mountainside property. So all the same.
As yet undetermined for a use.
Yes.
Unzoned.
Yes, that's correct. Now, in the parking lot between the road and the canal, which is that red crushed stone area to the right of the little access bridge here, was what we used to call the annex. And what that was an overflow for boarders and people that would come here for vacation to stay here at the Mountainside when the Mountainside rooms in the hotel itself were filled. This place would probably accommodate maybe 50 to 60 people. It was two-story. It was L-shaped with the large side facing the highway and the other large side facing this little access road coming from the Mountainside here to the towpath. It had a porch all the way around on the first floor, and a porch all the way around on the second floor, and was all filled with rocking chairs. Inside the building had a dance hall with a stage that every Saturday night and Friday night, if I remember serving it correct, they had dances in there. They had a local band of Point Pleasant that came and played, which consisted of guitars, drums, piano, saxophone, trumpet, trombone.
A dance band.
It was a dance band. And they held dances there every Friday and Saturday night. For the boys, they also had, my grandpa and grandmom at the Mountainside had canoes. They had rowboats they used to rent out for people to use here in the canal and or in the river. We used to fish in the canal. It was quite a summer resort area. The people came here by train from New York, Newark, Trenton, Philadelphia, to the train over here where I spoke earlier, and a little whistle stop over here called Byram. And from there, my dad would go over in the car or the truck or whatever needed to be to haul the people over here for their week's vacation or 2 weeks or their summer vacation.
Yeah.
In the location up here where Alan Fetterman has his home today, which we spoke earlier on that used to be 2 clay tennis courts in there, which was all portion of the Mountainside for people to play tennis. Between the tennis courts where Alan Fetterman's house is, which we're looking right now straight into those trees, used to be the apple orchard where they had apple trees, they had peach trees, pear trees and so forth, where grandmom used to take and preserve the apples and the pears and so forth and the peaches to be used in the hotel on the table.
Wonderful setup.
It was quite a place. It really was. You know, I don't remember all this because I was too young, and but you know, back in those days, people just loved to come here because it was fresh air. It was away from the city, away from the noise and everything else, and they could just come out to the country and they just loved it.
Mm-hmm. Well, show us where the old water pump is. That's still over there. Let's walk over.
Okay.
I guess we still have battery left.
Okay, right where I'm standing, right here, was where the little lock tender's house would be. He would come from the main house up here to lock above me, down here to stay. The foundation is no longer here, but it was right here, and it was no more than about 8 foot square, with a little A roof on it, and this is where you would stay to tend this lock here when boats would be coming through. He would come from that house, as I said earlier, down to here. He'd be able to get out of the weather, and then when they were finished, he would go back and stay at his house for the evening.
Sounds good. And it worked.
And we're standing in the mountainside of the parking lot. Mountainside.
And this is where all the gardens used to be.
And right where I'm standing was
the annex.
Where the building was called the annex.
Right.
This was a big building. It was here until the fellow who remodeled the Mountainside, his name was Ron Debris. He turned it into the fancy restaurant that it is today. And it was here, and he wanted more parking spots, so he had a local contractor come in, bulldoze it, and burn it. It was fully furnished when it was burnt with all
those antiques in
all the antiques in it, as far as the beds and dry sinks and the big wash bowls and pictures and the linens and everything, and it was all just pushed down in the foundation, set fire and burnt.
They could have at least had an auction first.
Yeah, it was all completely destroyed. I know at the time my aunt was still alive, which was my grandmother's daughter. That was the relationship, and I know it almost broke her heart because she lived here as a girl and worked here as a waitress and did all kinds of service work here at the Mountainside when she lived here.
Well, Mr. Debris, we've got words for you. You're not kind. So let's see if we can't find that foundation.
All right, I'm standing on top of a hand-dug well that was one of the locations for a source of water. And right here, on this, what is left of this concrete or cast iron, was a hand down in the hole, and I could see water down in there only about, I'd guess about 10, 15 feet deep below the surface of the ground. This well was probably about 35, 40 feet deep from what I recall, from what my dad used to tell me. And it was one of the sources of water supply that they used to come out and get if they wanted to. The place did have running water in it. This little annex, as we talked about here for the boarders and so forth, it had running water in it and storage as well. But this was just another added feature. So they used this well to pump out of. They had a hand pump on top of it.
So there's nothing left of the water.
All right. I'm standing on top of a well. And right here, this cast iron, what's left of it, was an old-fashioned hand pump. And this well helped supply water for the hotel and for the annex right here in the parking lot. And this well was put, this pump was put here kind of like an ornamental thing, which was operational.
Coming.
You know, for people to come over, get a bucket of water for the horses or whatever.
Move in, Tom. Turning. Not waiting for you.
It was more or less used like an ornament kind of a thing, but it was being able to be used. Okay.
I think there's too much traffic here to hear. I think we may as well go somewhere.
Right here. From here, that way was what used to be the ice house. This was not here, it was all stone wall. No steps or anything here. Had a hip roof on it. That's where they used to dump the ice down on the river, bring it up here. The fish tanks used to be located right in here where this stone wall is here today. It's all been made into building. There's nothing to show anymore that there was tanks here at all, but that's where they used to be located. When they were first built, they were built out of wood, they all rotted away, and then they were torn down and made into concrete, which lasted until they tore them out to build this building. The ice house, when it was built years ago, it was mainly designed for what we call the Delco system. The Delco system was that this building had electric lights in it before any electric company came through here and put electric in the building.
Huh.
It was battery and generators. You had a generator to charge the batteries. The batteries were in the ice house here before it was converted into an ice house. Then they had battery-operated electricity in the building by running wire in and having these lights operational.
Wow.
So it was the first building in Point Pleasant to have any kind of electric light inside of it other than candles and kerosene lamps.
Yeah.
That's about all I can recall on the history of this. I guess we'll move on to another point of interest.
Okay.
Okay.
I
Sherry.
asked Lance what that was. See that little horseshoe lined in stones? I've always wondered what that was and when it was from.
What that is, that was a place to pull a car in off the road. Probably built somewhere near 1900 or shortly afterwards when cars got to be more popular, maybe in the 20s and whatever. People on top of the mountain here had a log cabin. It was built out of logs, and the logs were cut off of the trees up there. And I don't remember where they lived as far as their main residence, but I'm going to guess it was probably Newark or something, that late maybe. They would come over by automobile, park the car in that horseshoe, and there was a zigzag that we called it. Went up there. It was a path that went up over the side of the hill. It was all made out of stone, cut out of the rock. It all had cedar banister on it that you could walk up, and there was a cabin on top of the hill. The people that had it, their name was Dyche. And that cabin was up there, and probably, I don't know, was built maybe, like I said before, in the 20s. I can remember playing around it as a kid. It was a beautiful cottage hall with a stone flagstone porch on the front of it. Had signs on the outside of it, shotgun traps, beware, do not trespass, wooden shutters that closed up the windows. And then it got to be a druggy hangout for these teen kids and so forth. And
Like in the 60s?
Back in the late 70s, early 80s. And the person who owns the ground today, to the best of my knowledge, is Jim Gimmel. He realized what was going on, and back in that time, back in, like I said, the end of the 70s, early 80s, he had the fire company burn the cottage down because the police were continually running up there making drug raids and so forth, and they just got tired of it and they wanted to do away with it, so he had the fire company burn it down. But that's what that horseshoe is over there for. If you can visualize the length of a car pulled in there off the road, And you have to remember back then this road wasn't quite as wide as what it is today, so you know, there would be plenty of room to get a car off the road without getting hit.
Do you think the zigzag started up to the left in your memory?
I think the point of rock right there either went right to the right of that or right to the left, and it gets up there in a little bit of a plateau, and it goes back and forth all the way to the top. I don't know whether you're going to find any remains of it today or not. I really don't. I might be able to pick out some of it, but it would be difficult now with all the trees and everything else and the erosion that's taking place.
Oh, right.
But you know, like I say, it had when you came to a corner and turned and went the other way, it had actually steps made out of stone that you would turn and go the other way, and then go back up the other way.
And so most of these trees weren't here.
Most likely not. Yeah. Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I guess next is the rings in the wall, in the canal wall. I don't know if you can film them over or if you guys have to walk down.
Come back slowly.
Tell me when you're...
Well, we're filming.
You're filming, are you?
Yep.
All right. Well, that ring that Tom has got on the camera, hopefully we got a picture of it. That's a ring that's here in the wall of the bank of the towpath. And that ring was there, I don't know when it was put there, but it was put there for raftsmen that came down the river in big log rafts. And the first raft came down, would stop and tie up there, spend the night overnight here in the Mountainside Hotel. The next one would come down and would tie onto that, and they would be probably, from what my grandfather told me, at least halfway across the river, tied end to end or side to side, whatever. They would stay overnight, and the next morning they would untie and continually go on down the river. There's another ring farther north of here by about 100 feet or so, and there would be two lines of rafts out here in the river. These rafts were made of logs. They would go to Philadelphia to be cut up into boards for building material, for shipbuilding, and whatever else they were needed for down there. Lots of times they had a boat upside down on them. That was a Durham boat that was built up in Durham, which is the same boats that was used when Washington used to cross the Delaware at his march to Trenton at Washington's Crossing. They were the Durham boats that was used.
So why would they take a Durham boat down sometimes?
It's because they were built up in Durham.
Oh, to deliver them?
To deliver them.
For delivery?
For delivery. Now these rafts were all different sizes. My understanding, they could be up to at least 80 feet wide and 120 feet long. And they would have maybe 4 guys on it, maybe even 6, with oars to steer these and to get them through the bridge piers and so forth. Now this operation stopped after the flood of 1903, when the Point Pleasant Bridge was washed away, and the one span of the steel bridge laid out here in the middle of the river, and the steel protruded up through the surface of the water, and consequently that stopped the rafting industry, along with trains and trucks and so forth that came into being, that was more economical and faster and everything else, rather than taking them down the river by raft.
Huh.
The term rafting that you see today of a lot of pleasure boats tied together out in the middle of a bay or something, that's called rafting. And that terminology came from these rafts being tied together in this type of operation all over the rivers all over the country. So, and they would spend the night, and they would stay here at the Mountainside Hotel, get a hot meal and a place to sleep, and continue on.
Yeah.
And then when they were finished down to Philadelphia, my understanding, they would actually walk back to the Poconos where these rafts were built.
I read that also.
And where the logs were tied together, made into rafts.
I read that also in the old Bucks County magazine.
Right. They had paths.
They would walk home.
Yep. They had paths that would be the most direct route. They wouldn't follow the river. They would take the most direct route. And along those routes, they had places to stop on the way back for lodging and meals.
Yeah.
This is what the history tells us, and this is what other folks have told me.
Right. Bethlehem Pike, for instance?
Yeah. Right. So, and this eddy here was an eddy in the river. That's the reason the rafts could stop here, because there is no current. Now this, years ago, before my grandparents on my Schneider side of the family had this, my grandparents on my mother's side of the family had it, was named Black. And there were 2 brothers. One had this hotel, and the other one had, which is still known today, Upper Black Eddy. And they were both brothers, and this was called Lower Black Eddy, and the one up the river was called Upper Black Eddy.
I used to think it was because the eddy made the water dark.
No, it was the last name in the family. And that's what's a little bit coincidental or ironic or whatever, that the Mountainside Hotel was owned at one time on both sides of my mother's family and on my father's family.
Yeah.
Many years apart.
Amazing.
Oh, and the original Black family that came over from Germany, what was the name?
Schwartz.
Was Schwartz, and they changed it to Americanize it into Black.
Right.
Gary Marshall from Heritage
Jeff
told us
Marshall.
that. Oh, Jeff Marshall. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yep.
Well, let's find the other ring.
Okay. And that's up here about another 100 feet.
Okay, stopping. Okay, this is the other ring. It's about how many feet behind the one we just filmed?
This is about 100 feet north.
Okay.
100 feet north of the other one we just filmed.
Yep. Okay. So there were two that are still existing. I don't know, there might have been more. Neat.
Well, if you figure they put these in when they built the canal, that would have been 1830 or so. To guess?
Yeah.
Unless they already had rings somehow in place along the river, and then when they built the canal, they incorporated into the canal wall.
Right. That's right. Which,
You know,
which we don't
because
know.
of all the rafting that went on up and
which we
down the
don't
river,
know.
maybe those rings
Yeah.
were in place.
Yeah.
Yep.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't have any way of knowing that at all. Nope.
Okay, well
Okay.
let's walk on.
All right.
Over out.
Okay. This right here that I have a hold of. This
Good.
is the most northern ring of what we just filmed a little earlier from up on the towpath. We're down alongside the towpath now in the stone wall. This is attached to a piece of steel strap iron that goes back in behind the stone, which is what actually holds it in the wall. There's another one which we photographed earlier, one down here in the wall, a little bit further. This does the same kind of an operation. All right. That's what they were for. First one would tie up to that, right near shore, and they keep on tying all the way across out into the river.
Okay, let's
Stay
walk.
overnight.
Let's maybe walk out. You want? Well, hold on. I'm going to stop. Okay.
This is the other ring right here that I have a hold of. It did the same operation as the one that we just photographed up here behind Tom with the camera. Like I say, it's fastened onto a piece of strap steel. If Tom wants to get down here closer with the camera and maybe take a look at exactly how it fastens into the wall, maybe he can zoom in on it.
Okay, let me
The ring
walk.
is probably about 6 inches in diameter, and the ring is probably about an inch thick in steel. Quite hefty to hold on to yet. I mean, it would hold quite a load yet.
Let me stop for a second. I'm going to wander.
Quiet on this one.
No, go ahead.
Well,
We're
this is what we were talking about earlier on the earlier footage. You can see how it's attached all the way back in here into the wall, all the way back as far as you can see. It's on a piece of strapped steel iron. It's probably about 2 inches wide and about an inch thick. And even to this day, it's still in quite good shape for all these years of being here. It
Sure is.
still is quite good shape.
Well, and this is the wall.
This wall was all hand built with donkeys and mules,
Yeah.
and this wall here that we're standing at, right at this position, is probably about 10 feet high. And this
There you
wall
have
is
it.
what retains and holds the canal back from washing away into the river.
Yeah.
So,
Here's the river. Right here. And that's the far side.
Go up to the Sears house?
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, this foundation that Tom has in the viewer here was foundation of a mini garage, little storage area that has been deteriorated, washed away, and whatever for the house that sat alongside of it, and the foundation's still there, which we're going to show you in a few minutes. The folks that used to live here, people with the name of Mr. and Mrs. Peters, and they lived here as a all year-round residency, and this was all part of the Mountainside property, and they rented this house. They lived here until their wee latter years. And I guess what they just finally were too old, they couldn't cope with it any longer, and probably went to one of their children, I guess, or a nursing home or whatever. I never knew what really became of them, but this was the mini garage and storage area, and in the background we can see the concrete columns, which is where the house was located.
Did they have any children?
I don't recall whether they did or not. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they ever had any children, so I don't know what ever became of them. Where they went or whatever, I don't know. But this house sat here until the flood of 1955. It was in deplorable condition then prior to the flood, but then the flood washed it away. And this was another means of income for the people, my grandparents, that had the hotel as a rental property. It was a cute little bungalow. There was not many trees here at the time. You could sit here and look out over the river. It was quite picturesque.
Here's the stairway. That's still here.
This was all lawn. It was all kept nice and cut. It was real pretty. I'm standing on the front steps where it went into the front door of the house, and you can see how long it's begun. It has been gone because look at the size of the trees in between the foundation of the cellar. And the cottage went this way. It had a porch on the backside, very small, one story, but they lived there as year-round, winter and summer.
Wow. Well, beautiful spot.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, well, over and out.
I like
know.
that.
Where we're standing right here, there's a lot of weeds, trees, and so forth. This was another cottage that was in here, and this is north of the one we just filmed. It was a larger of the two, and there again it was vacated and then became in deplorable condition and so forth and washed away in 1955. The last individual to live in here, his fellow's name was Charlie Lattice. He left here, and I don't know where he went from there, but then in later years I did find out that he used to be night watchman for Delaware Quarries for Joe Busick, which is located down here below Lumberville. And he was there, employed there for a period of time, and then after that, why, he finally went into a nursing home, which he since passed away quite a few years ago. But, he was a bachelor and lived here all by himself.
And I believe someone
good
said
darn.
Joe Busick took care of him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like paid for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, over and out.
So we're standing across the road from, belonged to my Aunt Minnie Keller, was the daughter of Grandpa and Grandma Schneider. This is her home where she lived, with children. It was to be an ice house before they built the ice house attached to the mountainside. It was only a small place. My dad built additions on it before they lived there. They lived there until about 1950, somewhere in that neighborhood, which they moved away and built another house on the other end of town. Today I don't know who lives there. I don't know what people's name.
Okay.
And this is adjacent to the Oddfellows, so it's all in a line here. The Mountainside Oddfellows and then this house, they're all in line.
Okay, now we're heading over to your old house.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I was wondering what that meant.
here we are at Lance's boyhood home. This is the Sears house.
Which has since been re-sided with aluminum siding, it looks like.
Yeah, aluminum or vinyl, one or the other. Yep. That's a big difference in what it used to look like.
Let's start here.
This walkway right here, and this green section right here, used to have a lamppost right in the center. In later years, prior to that, it was a water fountain. And it was spring fed by a spring up in the mountain, up here behind Tom. Came down here by pipe, and it was a fish pond and a fountain with all seashells around the outside of it. Walk right through the hedge.
The conch shells from the canal?
No. They were all seashells from down the Jersey Shore.
Oh.
Down the Jersey Seashore. Used to be a rose arbor here behind Tom with roses, American Beauty roses growing on it. It was pretty. It was pretty at one time. Still could be if somebody takes the initiative and damn pump people would sell it.
Big house. Big house.
You can see the mercury on the Venus from the side.
Yeah. Oh, it would have to be.
Ventilation closed up tight, no heat.
So what does this mean? An artesian well for what?
An overflowing well is an artesian well. That's what artesian means, overflowing.
Is that for water supply or?
Yes, that's the water supply. That's a drilled well, yes. Now that was not there. The well used to be in the back of the house, and then when they built the pump over here, they destroyed the well. They contaminated it, and then they had to drill a new well. And that's the reason the well's here in the front yard.
Since it's not used, there's nothing being taken out of it, it's just overflowing.
Well, probably even if it was in use, it would put so much water pressure, it probably would not
so you can see
use up all the water.
So you can see why this used to bubble up and be a natural
right.
fountain.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Got it now.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, signing off.
Well, tell about over here. There was a pond and an island. You can just press pause.
Down here in the backyard used to be a pond with an island in the middle of it, which was fed by springs as well. But it finally got so the springs dried up and the pond became not very much operational. So we filled it in. But that would also take, my dad would put fish in there from when he caught them out in the river to keep them live before he took them, put them back down there. It was kind of like a rotation kind of a thing. You know, this was like an overholding pond before they went back down there in those live tanks where the concrete was down along the hotel before they could purge themselves of the mud and so forth in the system.
You can shoot across the road to see your grandmother's house then,
Right,
too.
and then right directly behind Tom as he swings around here and pans around, now you're looking directly at the pump now. And then the White House in the background is where my grandmother Spider used to live, which is where my dad built that house after she had sold the hotel and moved out and gave up business at the Mountainside.
So what year was that built?
1948, 1950, I'm guessing.
And that was hand dug out of that hillside?
That basement was hand dug by a black gentleman here in Point Pleasant. His name was Jimmy Brown, and he was built like a bull. He had arms on him about the size of my legs, but he was only about as tall as Sheriff.
Wow.
And I mean, he dug that basement with a wheelbarrow, pick and shovel.
Unbelievable. Considering all the stone.
Oh, yeah.
And Jimmy Brown also was involved in work on our property.
And he was also involved on the canal boats, too.
Yep. Yep.
When they were in operation.
Amazing. Yeah, he was quite the character, and I understand he lived till pretty recently.
Yes, not through, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago he finally passed away.
I'll be darned.
Yep.
And he was a riverboat captain,
he live?
wasn't he?
Yeah, canal boat.
Canal boat captain.
Yeah.
Where did he physically live, or he lived on the boat?
He lived, in latter years, he lived up on Tickin Hill, right above where Charles lives.
Okay.
On the left-hand side, and there's the
Yeah.
old homes right in there.
Okay.
He had a house
So
in
he
there.
lived right there?
Yeah. And his wife. They never had any children.
Yeah.
He used to work with my dad. He would be the guy that would help carry cement block and mix cement and things like that, you know, and help lay block is kind of like a mason laborer kind of a thing.
Anything else that we can think of?
Well, I'm trying to think. I think we've about pretty much covered most everything that I can think of. We're kind of run out of information, I think, now.
Okay, over and out.
Thanks.
One single board in here. Built this line over here like that because there used to be a post right underneath here like that.